Taking care of the person you love and watching them dying of wasting syndrome, there's nothing fun about that. And so after he died, we gathered 2/3 of the total signatures, probably about 20,000 signatures in the 5 weeks after Steve died. And that was just a remarkable moment because he had had such an impact on the community here as an advocate for people with AIDS and as an advocate for residents of DC that a lot of people in the community just came together. It was an exciting moment, but it was satisfying because we had kept that commitment. I mean, we had lost Steve, but we hadn't lost this initiative, and we carried on in his name. As it turned out, 10 days before the election, Congress placed an amendment on the DC budget that said that DC could not expend any funds to conduct a ballot initiative that lessened penalties for marijuana. DC is treated like a colony in many ways. We have 600,000 residents who live here. We don't have a vote in Congress, and we also don't control our own budget. So even locally raised tax dollars are subject to this congressional appropriations process, where our own tax dollars are handed over to people in Congress and then appropriated as one of then 14 appropriations bills.
Petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate fascist elite SOBs vilified the cannabis plant as a first step towards severing us from the natural cycle of things and taking the farmer out of competition with them in the production of fiber and fuel and medicine and food.
I think that the laws against marijuana are the most vivid illustration of where this government has overstepped its bounds in policing private behavior.
The 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was the first time that our government had ever taken it upon themselves to tell us what seed we could plant in the ground and which seed we could not plant in the ground. And by virtue of using that one law against that one plant, they usurped our relationship with the natural cycle of things.
So when people ask Galbraith, why is the change in the marijuana laws, why is it important to the people and to this country? Because it returns to the people the right to plant a seed in God's earth and consume the green natural plant that comes up out of it.
And today there are demonstrations just like this in every major city across the world. We need to rediscover a cash crop, one that will allow our farmers to go back to the land. One that will allow our farmers to compete with the petrochemical pipelines.
The cannabis plant should be legalized in all its aspects, both in its smoking for medical use and in its use as hemp for industrial and textile commerce. Hemp is the #1 fiber, the #1 fuel, the #1 food, and #1 medicine. So the laws against marijuana are the most important step that this government special interest have put together and put on the people to remove them from the natural cycle of things.
Okay, yes, sir. My pleasure, my distinct pleasure. Thank you all for all your work and all your activities.
But it's certainly a difficult experience, but I know there are people who go through so much worse than we do, and I have support from thousands of people, and Mark has the support of many, many thousands of people. So we'll get through it, and we can be a face and a name for all the people who are in prison without the support and recognition we have. So when I run with the Free Mark campaign, I'm really saying we need to free all drug war prisoners because none of them should be there. His mission that he stated from the beginning was to plant the seeds of freedom and overgrow the government. The idea being people would grow their own cannabis so they could use their own medicine and not buy from gangs and cartels, and every dollar they spent getting seeds from him would go towards ending the war on drugs to free everybody from prison who's in there unjustly. Medical marijuana, people often think there's medical use and then recreational use, but when you look at the word recreation, it means healthy activity. So in fact, using recreational cannabis or using cannabis recreationally I consider it to be preventative health care, preventative medicine. And if it can reduce all these ailments and keep your stress level low, that adds years to your life before you're even sick.
You know, smoking marijuana puts you into a timeless state, or a state in which you are kind of revolving with the planet in its eternal...
To celebrate 420 on a Tuesday afternoon.
On the day of the election, it turned out that officials of the Board of Elections and Ethics had received phone calls from folks in Congress saying, you can't tally those votes. You cannot spend any money conducting this election. The ACLU in our court case took it to federal court. It took 11 months to get that court decision. So 11 months sitting by the phone, waiting for the ruling to come down. And finally it did. And Judge Richard Roberts issued his ruling, and he said, you know, go ahead and count the votes. Congress does not have the authority to quash a First Amendment activity, even in DC residents. And that's when we found out that Initiative 59 passed. It passed by 69%, and it also passed in all 8 of DC wards and every single voter precinct.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon along with Councilmember Mendelson for a joint public hearing on Bill 18622, the legalization of marijuana for Medical Treatment Initiative Amendment Act of 2010.
This is a victory for the people of D.C. because the council was prohibited from legislating in this matter as part of the Barr Amendment, which prevented us from implementing Initiative 59. So this really is a victory for democracy, and this issue is right here where it belongs, here in the council chambers, being decided by our elected officials.
It doesn't look like Congress is going to be overturning it, although resolutions have been introduced.
It's part of the injustice that we live with as D.C. residents, that we have to be mindful of what Congress is going to do, because it's not going to help any patient if this whole thing gets shut down. And so as we proceed, I think that the bill as proposed, and there's certainly some room for improvement, but I think that taking a cautious and measured approach is the best way to serve the critically ill patients who can depend on medical marijuana.
My name is Keith Strop. I like to say when I give lectures, I start off by saying I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I'm a 64-year-old lawyer. I first smoked marijuana 43 years ago when I was a freshman at Georgetown Law School, and I've been a regular smoker ever since. I am a lawyer. I founded NORML in 1970, and I currently serve as legal counsel.
The purpose was we wanted to be a lobby nationwide and in Washington for responsible marijuana smokers. And that was our purpose then, and it remains our purpose today. Now that's not to say that we don't have different tactics and techniques today. Certainly we do. It was considered quite a radical idea back in 1970 and the early 70s. Whereas today, obviously, we have the support of a majority of the American public for both medical use of marijuana and also for stopping the arrest of responsible smokers. And we're getting close now to having majority support for actually legalizing and regulating and taxing marijuana. We've shifted the focus from just stopping arrest smokers to let's get a legal market where consumers can buy their marijuana in a safe and secure environment.
It's just incredible to me that it's taken 73 years to really address marijuana prohibition. It's largely taken 40 years to address medical marijuana, to actually just simply acknowledge marijuana does have medicinal properties. There's a respectable minority of Americans who have serious diseases or have their sense threatened, like glaucoma, who would be able to use it under a doctor's recommendation. Another prime example of such is in Oakland, where for years they had a very low tax on cannabis, and the industry itself, something I don't think anybody can probably cite an example for in their lifetime, where an industry in the United States raised their hand and said, we would like to be taxed, and we would like to be taxed at a fairly high rate, what we would call a vice rate, beyond your average consumption rates. And so now in Oakland, the voters have voted in the vast majority to tax cannabis. They raised it from a few pennies per $1,000 sold to $18 per $1,000 of marijuana sold in Oakland is now taxed. And so that is now raising tens of millions of dollars of revenue in Oakland.
But the question is it going to be legal to sell for profit cannabis, basically? And that's what I think the next wave of legalizations or decriminalizations are about, is figuring out how to get cannabis to the public, either as a medicine and also as a recreational substance.
And so the question is, should we do something reasonable like legalize and tax cannabis, which may mean as many tax and the reduction of costs as many as $40 to $50 billion a year, moving from one side of the governmental ledger to the other?
Clearly, economics today are making this issue so much more viable. There are dozens of counties, municipalities, and now the state of Colorado that is officially taxing cannabis. In the state of Colorado, they will be taxing it to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars per year, potentially.
When the Marie Claire article came out called Stiletto Stoners, and it got a huge reaction, and it even caught me off guard, and it was about professional women who chose to unwind with a joint or just consuming marijuana as opposed to going out for a drink, and how there were a lot of women that were doing that, and it was kind of a unrecognized phenomenon. Just, you know, being a woman in this movement, it was kind of exciting to see, and I was like, I wound up writing a blog about it and about the article and about how it was called Because Women Are Normal Too.
This next generation, you know, for I think this millennium is going to be the internet, bringing everyone together, you know, instant mass communication.
So I came up with the Normal Women's Alliance. I pulled tons of content off the internet. I came up with principles, declaration of principles, kinds of things that we would support publicly, statements, basically. I know, you know, a lot of women are afraid of their image. They don't want to look like a stoner or a slacker, and they're afraid, you know, in their community they'll look like that. They'll look like a drug user. You know, people tend to judge women on a different level than men. I think it's easier for men to come out and say they support it, because women have a lot more on the line. You know, if they're mothers, then they have their kids on the line. Just, you know, if they're just women in jobs, they, you know, they're more scrutinized.
For a lot of Americans, they smoke when they're younger, when they're in college, maybe when they're first out of college, but when they get married and settle down and have kids, there's a tendency to stop smoking or smoke a lot less. Well, a lot of older Americans are rediscovering marijuana, so I'm proud of my generation. Marijuana smokers come in all shapes and sizes and all political beliefs. So it's terribly important for those of us who are mainstream and middle class and wear coats and ties to stand up and say, look, I'm an otherwise law-abiding citizen, but I smoke marijuana. So take a look. It's a new image for marijuana smokers.
Whole heritage of NORML is very, very serious about the information that we impart, that we put on our website. I mean, there's over 10,000 pages behind our homepage on the website. Every one of those pages has been vetted. And one of the beautiful things about NORML as an organization is we are grassroots. There's no billionaire somewhere that writes us a check and hires the executive director. NORML is you out there.
I really do think in its distillation, it is the consumers' lobby here in Washington, D.C. for 40 years. The thing that is so vexing about what Keith both beautifully created and burdened us